I sure will. So is it okay if I share my screen right now? Good morning to all of you. Please give me a thumbs up or something if you can see my screen. Does that work? Okay.
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. Well, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. I am so glad to be invited to share a little bit about myself and our journey into advocacy and into just whatever we do, living the rare life. So part of my presentation is going to be what I see as advocacy and what I see as sharing my story and what we've done with the life that we have been living. So I'll just dive right in. And I like to put in here what really is a definition of an advocate, because, you know, I have been working in this space now, living through this life, but what I figured was, I was like, okay, everybody talks about advocacy and advocate and capacity building. And, you know, I was like, what does this all mean? Like, what does it mean to be an advocate? How can I call myself an advocate? And so I took the actual definition of an advocate, and then I said, oh, one who pleads the cause to another specifically. I was like, oh, that's what we do every single day of our life when we are caregivers or patients ourselves. One who supports or promotes the interest or cause for a group. Well, guess what? You're advocating for your foundation. And lastly, support or argue for a cause in favor of pretty much everybody, every single person here or in your community does this, and I'll show you how we've been doing it, but I just wanted to give you a quick overview and through my presentation of me sharing my story and my life with all of you, I hope that you can see subtly the different ways we've tried to advocate for ourselves in these particular, you know, buckets, as I like to call them, because it's, you know, one of the frequently asked questions that I get, or I don't know if anybody else has done, is this: how can we do this living our life? Because, you know, it's complicated enough just to live a normal life, and then you have a rare life, and it's like, now you're telling me I also have to advocate. So hopefully through my story you will see what we're doing and maybe get some pointers of what you're doing, or you can teach me what you do in advocacy. So this is a little bit about our story, and I say our story because I am the representative for the family. I call myself a medical mom, but these are my two children, Yash and Ira, and we had no idea what rare disease was until they came into our life. So this became our story. You know, if you can go far enough and remember, at least as we were, you know, young and not so smart, we had this entire roadmap. We were like, we are going to become parents. We know exactly how our children's lives are going to look. We have everything planned, which school, which college, like heck, their wedding, like we had it all planned. It looked like this picture perfect highway. We were like, this is going to be our journey to parenthood. And then we got the story that, you know, we got told we have a rare disease. And we're like, okay, what does that mean? Well, it felt like a car crash. And then as I tell you more about our story, you'll see we've now been having many car crashes since that first time we got told between both our children. We were like, oh, so pretty much when I walk into the hospital, I now say, yes, the train wreck family is here, because that's how it feels and that's who we are, but we own it. And we're like, yes, we're a wreck, but you know what? It's our wreck and we are owning it. We wear our seatbelts when we can and we do the best we can, but beware, this is our life and this is just what it is. So no complaints to us, you know, whatever is going on, you have to figure that out. And that's literally, I'm sure, what our nickname is within the hospital system, because we walk in like that. To give you a little bit of our background of how we live our life. My son was born in 2008. I think he was 3 years old at the very leftmost picture, just, you know, neurotypical, living life, following that beautiful scenic pathway. And then our diagnostic odyssey started when he was about 4 years old, when he started having blood in his stools. So you see him there, super thrilled that, you know, he's getting an x-ray and missing school. And we had this whole day planned because we were so stressed. Our child was getting an x-ray and, you know, we did all of these things. And then, of course, fast forward to 2012, I believe, when he's there. The bottom left picture is him post-surgery. After about 10 hours, they took out his colon and rectum. And when he woke up from anesthesia, he wanted to meet the chief resident and ask her to show him pictures of his colon that they took out to make sure they took out the right organs from his body. So came a long way from that kid in the park to like, are you sure you took the right things out? But that was just him. And I was like, are you like with it? Are you hurting? He goes, no, I just want to see what they took out to make sure they took out the right thing. That's just what it became. And then fast forward to last year, this collage of pictures that you see on the left, what we used to take for granted, our child was walking and playing, is now a learning journey. Every time he has a massive surgery, this was after a 12-hour surgery and 3 weeks in the ICU, we literally had to teach our child to get up and walk. And it took a series of pictures over a week for us to make that happen. But, life as we knew it just kept having many turns and many U-turns. And we've just learned a completely different path that doesn't exist and that we've created for ourselves. But this is just to show that, we were super scared about the first x-ray. And now we're like, oh, I'm just going to take pictures while you learn to stand up and walk. And this is the confidence that living this life brought to us, because we knew that no matter what train wreck we walk into or what surgery we have to stand back up and we have to do what we have to do to keep moving forward, because there really is no other option. And so this is the story of my easier child. Next is the story. So yes, here's my small reminder of being an advocate as a caregiver and a patient. He advocates as a patient more than we do for him. Now he's 13. He has a lot more questions to the doctor. Usually we're like, yes, we'll sign another consent. But he's like, hold on, I have questions. So it's his journey as much as it is our journey now. But that is what advocacy looks like as your child grows from doing all of this to now saying, well, I really have questions too. So I wanted to include that there. This is my other pumpkin. This is Ira, my daughter. Yash was 4 when his diagnostic odyssey started. He had his first colonoscopy when he was 6 years old, and that's around the time my daughter was born as well. Well, she chose to have her own path. She was born with 6 toes and 6 fingers, and we just thought, we're like, this is awesome. We have extra to love, because until then we had no idea what it meant. Yeah, this is how naive we were. We're like, this is great. This is perfect. Nothing's wrong. Well, she was not neurotypical like our child, and now I even question what typical is, because she had her own path and she had her own trajectory of what normal was. But there she was. I think she was about 6 months old there getting physical therapy, because we didn't know why. She was exclusively breastfed and she still gained a ton of weight. And so we were like, oh, she's so squishy. There's just so much to love. Well, about a month after her physical therapy, here in this picture, we were told she has a genetic condition called Bardet-Biedl syndrome. Another train wreck. We're like, what on earth does that mean? No one in our family has that. We've never heard of this condition. And I tell you this because our geneticist said there's no cure, but they'll be developmentally delayed. They'll have kidney failure issues, may need a transplant. They'll be morbidly obese. And they'll have progressive blindness, and most kids by the time they're 10 or 11 will have night blindness and then become blind, like legally blind. We're like, oh, that's all? Like, oh my God, we now have a 6-month-old child that you're telling us is going to go blind. You don't have a trajectory of this is when she's going to go blind, but we'll just take her home and care for her. Or at least that's how it felt when we told. Of course, like many of you, I'm sure, or maybe not, but we were crazy. We went on Dr. Google and we were like, oh my God, what is this condition? We have to learn everything about this. Like, how can we take care of a child who's going to go blind? And we found out through research that there's a clinic in the middle of Marshfield, Wisconsin, that's a center for excellence for this condition. And then we started this whole journey of we're going to go there, we're going to find out what to do and, meet others. And I'll tell you, that was very impactful to us because we felt very isolated until then. And then a year after we did that, when Ira was about 2, we organized one of the family conferences. This seems like a lifetime ago because we met people in person. But it was like, oh, there are researchers, but we got to see adults with this condition who were blind, but they were like, yeah, it never bothers us. Like, we just live our life now. We got to meet others. And that really changed our perspective on the importance of having that community of people who get it. And so we were like, okay, now at least it sucks, but at least we have others who get what we're saying. Well, that was just one easy part of her journey. On her first birthday, through all of these pictures, you know, I can speak for 2 hours on just our daughter's high points, but some of the pictures that we captured her on her first birthday, she was transported in an ambulance from one local hospital to another, and she had a massive infection that just did not get better. But through that, she also developed an autoimmune condition called opsoclonus myclonus syndrome. So, you know, she did make tremendous great gains, even though she was developmentally delayed. She lost all of that because it affected her entire CNS system. So she stopped walking, cruising, babbling, smiling, and losing a lot of her milestones that she had made gains. But again, we did what we had to do, and we said, you know, we're still going to teach her to walk and do whatever we can. So that's her using her walker. Then she became wheelchair bound. She received a lot of treatments. And around the same time, after my son had his surgery, they felt like even though he had whole genome sequencing, and both of them had whole genome sequencing, they didn't find what was the reason that my son was getting all these cancers. And then we were just at the right place at the right time because the doctors ordered another test, and they found out that they both had a condition called CMMRD. It's a cancer predisposition syndrome. We found out that our children were the only 2 in the world thus far that we know of with homozygous EpCAM mutation. Basically, beyond the mumbo jumbo, what this means is they have a genetic disorder that does not recognize abnormal cells in their body. So they will get repeated cancers throughout their lifetime. There's no cure to actually fix the genetic condition. So they try their best to do a lot of testing and surveillance so that they catch the cancer early. So our daughter had her first colonoscopy when she was 2.5, and they took out 3 cancerous polyps from her colon. And so we learned one more time, it's like, how do you make a 2.5-year-old drink all of that? If you've ever had it, it's nasty, and it's giant amounts of Miralax or colon prep. And so we had to get her an NG tube and all of that. So as you know, like I said, I can go for hours talking about the journey that my children had gone through, but I'm sure so would all of you, because our journeys are all unique, but some of our pain points and some of the things we experience are similar. And so this was her through the ages. She went from being just receiving PTOT and speech to receiving nursing care at home because she was completely dependent on us. So that's her nurse there. And she on her wheelchair. Hospital was our second home. Her nurses and her physicians were all her preschool teachers, and that's how we lived life. This is our life as a medically complex family. I took both kids to doctor's appointments. Sometimes it was same floor, different floors. This was a time when my daughters, they both were in the same hospital, different hospitals. We did what we could. I would still say it's a blessing because my husband and I were able to single parent our kids individually, because there were times I took my child to Boston Children's Hospital. So we live in North Carolina. In case we didn't mention, so we from North Carolina, I took my son to Boston Children's Hospital. My husband took our daughter to Cincinnati Children's, and we did that multiple times. But this is what we did because we had to go to give them the care that we had to give. And this is what our life looked like. And I always put this picture because a lot of times physicians, researchers, industry, and sometimes other newer rare disease families don't see the gamut of challenges that we have. We go where we have to go to get our children the care they need. And, you know, sometimes it's simple. It's like multiple clinics in one place. Sometimes it's like this, you know, that story that I told you where we found through Google that Marshfield, Wisconsin had that BBS center. That's the physician that started it. And he's just doing it because he's very committed to this condition. And so that we went there. Chapel Hill is home. That's why you see all the doctors are posing there with my daughter. Cincinnati, Ohio, we went because they were the Center for Excellence for Aerodigestive Conditions, and that's one of the things our daughter had. Charlotte, Living Children's, one of our oncologists moved from Chapel Hill, where we used to go, to Living Children's, and much like many other rare disease families, we went where the doctor went because, you know, it was just much more harder to find a doctor who was committed like him in this condition to do whatever they could for our child. So I would drive her about 2.5 hours one way, twice a week, from where we lived to Living Children's, just for her to get the special procedure. They're the only pediatric hemodialysis unit where we live, so we went there for that. The very right-hand corner, the reason I put that picture, and I know it looks funky, but it's very important for rare disease families to know that sometimes you don't need to go wherever they're doing the research. You don't need to actually be a patient there, but you can still support and advocate for moving research, for supporting the researchers who work in this field. And we did that by sending blood and tissue samples to our doctors. So the largest research center for our child's, for Yash's and Ira's condition is through Sick Kids Toronto. There's only about 300 people in the world fully diagnosed with this condition, out of which maybe about 100 or 200 are still alive. And if we break that down somewhat, our children are the only children in the world with a particular gene mutation. And so when we asked them, we're like, can we just come to Toronto? We went to Marshfield, we went here, we went there, we'll just come to Toronto. And they basically said, there's nothing we can do right now for your children. It's all in labs, it's all in test tubes, it's all in, you know, if you really want to help, send us your tissue sample, send us your blood sample. So we could not find hospital systems that would send it. So I was like, fine, send me the test tubes. I will find the FedEx to send a biosample from North Carolina to Toronto with a tracking number. So it had to be like temperature, but it's possible. And this happened because we were very passionate and we really wanted this to go there, because we felt like no matter what, our children should at least at the minimum be contributing to what these researchers are trying to do. And we're very cognizant that there may never be a cure in our lifetime or in their lifetime, but at least their blood, their tissues will provide that clue that the physicians and the researchers need to continue to help so that this is not experienced by other families. And so I know it's a very funky picture, but that was literally when I was standing in the FedEx office, and I was like, I'm going to take that picture because this is just not normal. Who sends blood, vials from one country to another? The reason I put Phuket, Thailand is because my son loves traveling, and with our daughter, it's very difficult to travel because she has an autoimmune condition and we couldn't travel. So for his 10th birthday, we said, I make it super special. We're going to take you to Thailand and it's going to be phenomenal. Well, we landed in Thailand and he had a fever. Okay, it's okay. We went to the local hospital. He has central line. They did the blood samples. On his 10th birthday at 7 a.m. in the morning, we got a call that said he has a nasty bloodstream infection and that if we don't bring him in, he will die. And so the rest of the 10th birthday celebrations were in a 200 square foot room. It's very small. The three of us spent about 3 weeks there in a foreign country, not knowing the language, not knowing the healthcare system, just hoping and praying that we bring him back home safe and sound. And they were great. And they did an amazing job. We're here now to tell the story. But the highlight for me is that nothing's ever normal for us, even what we think is great and the best laid plans are always going to have something else happen. So for next time, we're always going to map out any place we ever have the fortune to visit to the closest hospital. And before we even do that, we are like, okay, will this hospital be able to take care of us? Do they understand the language? What kind of money do we need to keep them alive in a hospital in a foreign country with foreign currency? So one of the reasons I'm sharing this, not that you all have not experienced this, is because in the midst of everything else we do, we are still trying our best to stay afloat. We're still trying our best to communicate, whether it was in Thailand where it was language we didn't understand, or back home here where we do understand. Sometimes it feels like we're continuing these conversations that we're not sure if the physicians are listening, the researchers are listening, the industry is listening. Sometimes it feels like, hey, I'm trying to tell you something. I know you're listening, but are you really, really listening and understanding what I'm saying? So, it's complex no matter what it is, but what I found is continuing to advocate, continuing to not give up, continuing to not change yourself, but try to change their mindset will eventually work. It's exhausting and sometimes frustrating, but we have to do it because our children matter, or our adult care, whoever we're caring for matter. And, our hope is to keep our children alive longer than we are, so that as they grow older, they can advocate for themselves. But we may even have to take care of our parents who may have a rare disease as an adult. And so no matter where you are in this spectrum, advocate, share your story, and make it meaningful and make it powerful. It is frustrating and exhausting, but in the end, it will make a difference. And so hopefully you see that. This is important to us. It's another important part of our journey. Just through her life, but when she was 3.5 years old, everything we were trying was not working. For my daughter's medical journey, so we did palliative care. We moved her to palliative care and hospice. Our goal was for her to celebrate her 4th birthday because we wanted to be there as a family and not have a hospital birthday. All other of her birthdays were in the hospital. She did make it to her 4th birthday. The picture on the left is a picture of that. 2 weeks after her 4th birthday, she passed away. And that's when we learned that it does not matter how long you live, how well you live, or if you don't speak at all, because she did not in the end speak other than mom and maybe dad at one point of her life. She never spoke, but she profoundly had an impact by just being herself, by just being this unique child who knew to communicate which music she wanted on her iPad by throwing her iPad at her nurses. She thought all her nurses, all the Bollywood songs that she liked. She mattered by giving her tissue samples and blood samples and giving back to research. She's always going to have her legacy, but we also felt like, what can we do to showcase to the world that she continues to live with us? So this is what we did, when we started this, and through this 4 years that she was with us, and now 7 years of this journey with our son, we realized we're Indian. If you haven't figured that out by now, we're from South Asia originally, but we realized there's not a lot of people like us who, at that time, we're on a stage, or we're discussing their journey, or we're talking about mental health, or we're talking about the difficulties of parenting medically complex children. So we wanted to teach our South Asian community that this is real, this does exist. People like us are in the hospital for prolonged amounts of time. And so we used Diwali, which is one of our big holidays. It comes around Ramadan. The year we started, Diwali and Ramadan were at the same time. So we said, okay, we're going to do a toy drive and involve the community, and we're going to share our stories. So we've done that 5 years in a row, and it's really grown. And so this was from this past year where we ended up doing wheelchairs and all of that to give back to the local hospital, because you know what, we're only one part of the story. Our hospitals are 24/7. Our children need care 24/7. Clinics and child life specialists, they're all working there 24/7. So we felt like it was one of our callings was to give back to UNC Children's, because that's where Ira received most of her care. We also did a Band-Aid drive because we learned that the nurses were paying for colorful Band-Aids in the hospital. It's a state hospital. So of course they're going to find the cheapest Band-Aids, but nurses wanted to give cute Band-Aids. And we realized, we're like, I'm sure every family can donate a box of Band-Aids. And when we all put it together, I think we collected about 40,000 individual Band-Aids. And so it was like, the hospital said, please do not give us Band-Aids anymore because we don't have space to store it, which was a great problem because we don't want nurses spending their own personal money to buy Band-Aids. So that one box of Band-Aid had such an impact in the community that we could fill an entire children's hospital all across with Band-Aids. And so I just feel like that's such a small thing to do, but collectively just showed the power of community coming together. We do Ronald McDonald House meals, and then, like I said, we are only one in the world. We are doing everything we can with our researchers to support research, but in the meanwhile, my philosophy is, yes, I'll support our researchers and I'll do everything that they want us to do. But in the meanwhile, as a rare disease community, I can give back a lot more to the community itself, because yes, I would love for them to find a pipeline drug that will fix my son's genetic condition. Until that happens, I can still use our experiences. So when COVID happened, you know, and I'm sure all across the country, caregivers were not automatically approved to be in group 1. Now anybody can walk into our grocery store and get a COVID vaccine, but at that time it wasn't. So we did a lot of advocating in the state of North Carolina, and we did get DHHS to include unpaid healthcare workers, aka parents or adult caregivers, to receive the vaccine in group 1, because what we told them was, we walk into the hospital, we don't want to, we don't have a choice. Some of these procedures, some of these tests, some of our physical visits are in a hospital clinic, even though everybody else is virtual. So sharing our story, reaching out to others in the community, trying to do what we can will always make a difference. Was an advocate. After reading all of this, I say you're an advocate. Everyone's an advocate. If you're in this space, you're an advocate, whether you know it or not. Who do we advocate to? I feel like everyone, literally everyone. Your family, your community, hospital, insurance. When you're fighting with your insurance when they're not covering something, don't step back, keep pushing. You're an advocate. You know, if you're doing local things like a park or like we did for the hospital, you're advocating. You know, yes, it's a Band-Aid drive. It's all about Band-Aids, but guess what? What the goal was that if we collectively come together as a community, we can really make a difference. State level, I'm glad everything's virtual now, because it's easy to give these examples. Everybody can do it. When you go to Rare Across America and you're talking to your legislator or 2 secretaries of his, or, you know, interns, you're still advocating. At some point, you are still bringing across that message. On a national level, I know the E.WE Foundation is a part of Global Genes. That also means you're also taking your story international. So when you share as a group, as a patient, your story at different places, you're really not just advocating for yourself or your child or for whoever it is that you care for, but for the community at large. So just know that there's power in everything that you do. Why advocate? Well, for me, it was easy because I advocate for both of these kids. You know, as parents, not only do we, it's not like the flu that just goes away. This is forever. I always say that it's not PTSD, it's CTSD, it's chronic trauma. It's, you know, as caregivers, it's like it never ends. But the beauty is it never ends. So we can fight for them, you know, whether they're with us here or they're not. In my case, with our daughter, we will continue to fight for her and with her in our memories. And so find your purpose. I know you all have it already. find the reasons and find how you can share your story such that they will hear. If you've done it 4 times and they've not heard it, then rethink, what can I change? What can I tweak in my story now that I will get their attention, because they are as important to our story as we are when we share it with them. That's about it. So these are the different ways I chose from just being that mom to, you know, one of the ways I started advocating is when my child was in the hospital. We were there for almost 4 months after his colon was taken out. He's had a lot of complications. And at one point I noticed that the same things kept happening. The same mistakes kept happening. And I didn't want to be that whistleblower. I didn't want to have that eye roll like, oh, it's that mom or that family. And so I said, okay, I have a solution. I don't want this to happen again. So I sat and I had all these, you know, I was like writing it all down, and I was like, fine, I have a solution to this. It may or may not work, but where do I go to do this? And I said, I don't want to go to patient, whatever that's called, where, you know, it's a complaint box. I said, I don't want to do that. I want to be able to have a seat at the table to tell the people who are involved. And it wasn't like EVS or food service. It was like physicians were doing something that I felt like was happening over and over again. And I was like, okay, maybe you guys don't know what it is for a family to be when you're doing this. So let me share that. And this is what we do. And I made some of the best physician friends when I did that. Because I said, how can I be more involved? And they said, well, did you know we have a patient family advisory board? Like, we really use them to come back with feedback. And so about 6 years ago, I was like, fine, I will join that board. I will sit in these meetings. I want to know what they're doing so that we can make a difference. And I, 6 years ago, I joined the board, and I would go to every meeting, and I would just quietly understand what they're doing. And I would say, okay, this is what I suggest. 6 years later, I'm the chair of the Patient Family Advisory Board now. And I have the time now. I didn't then, but it takes time. And now we do resident training. We do medical student training. And yes, it's not for my son's condition, but it's for patients in the hospital. And a lot of those patients are rare disease patients or medically complex patients. And hopefully that will make a difference to them. We've spoken to industry. I speak to whoever will ask me to speak to, because I feel like hopefully something will be heard from what I'm saying, and that will spark your journey to go in a different direction or start your journey. But I speak a lot with industry about what it is like to live as a rare disease family, because a lot of times they need to understand our journey. They need to understand why we're doing what we're doing, what our pain points are. They all have good intentions. Yes, they have to make money in the end as well, but it would help if they're creating this drug or they're creating this clinical trial based on what we need and not based on what they think they need. So I do talk to industry because I want them to know we're all here. I always tell them, I'm like, all you have to do is ask. I can guarantee you, I can give you 10 advocates or organizations at the top of my head who will come and talk to you. You just have to ask, and you just have to find the disease-specific group or the organization that will work with you. And if you can't find it, we will. I used the FDA open comment period this year to share my thoughts on what it is to live with rare, and what our dream would be is to have more priority vouchers for rare diseases, because that means that if a company or a researcher actually came up with a drug, the FDA will still have to take its own sweet time. So having that fast priority voucher will make it more lucrative for industry and researchers to create a faster pathway to drugs. So that was one of the things I did. And 7 years later, after a lot of talk, our researchers in Sick Kids Toronto, where I set those blood tubes too, have created a research advisory board, and the research advisory board is run by parents and caregivers. So that screenshot there is the consortium where now we meet every month, and they ask us, they say, we're working on this research protocol. What do you think? We're going to conduct this research. How do you think, what can we do for patients and families to be a part of this research? It takes time, but don't stop, no matter where you are in this journey, to advocate, because in the end, whatever it is that you want will happen if we do it methodically and we do it consistently and we do it with purpose. And your purpose is always going to be, whoever you're caring for. So as long as you keep that in mind and you understand that everybody wants to help, they just don't know how. And so if you have a plan of telling them how, they can't come back with, well, now we don't know what to do. Well, I just gave you the solution. So let's all get together and figure out what we can do. And that usually always works. Like I said, every single stakeholder in the rare disease space needs advocacy. And that is why we all are advocates. This is what I usually end my presentations with, and this is for everyone, no matter who I present to, including parents, because caregivers. And I hope this is just for my children, but this is a program called Beads of Courage. And if you haven't heard of it, I hope you go find it in your hospital, because it's very impactful for me. Sometimes, like you said, most of my story I can only share with pictures. I can give you a lot of data, but I can give you a better story when I share my pictures, because my children inspire me. But each of these beads are a procedure, hospital stay, therapy, medication challenge. They each tell a story of where we are in this journey. And they always remind me that it's a lot bigger. Today, my problems may just be like, oh my God, I just want the doctor to get me this medication and CVS is not helping me with it. When I look at this picture, I'm like, hey, we've done so much. We can continue to do this, but it also gives me purpose, because a lot of times physicians or industry don't understand the day-to-day struggles that we have. And this sort of, for me, captures everything in one picture, because it's like each of these were what my child went through, but in reality, the whole family experienced it. And so that's for my son. And on the right, the reason I took this picture was because Ira passed away when she was 4. And we wanted to keep her legacy going. So I took her beads and I took this doll that was done as a replication of her. And I went to our local elementary school where she would have gone if she had started school. And I took that picture and I said, you know, no matter what, you will continue to inspire me, and your legacy doesn't end just because you're not here. So our beads of courage we don't have more to add to her beads, but her being here was our strongest and most powerful courage. So with that, I end my story, and I hope you all could take something from it and find useful.